Badlands. Explain those Badlands. That's a hell of a name.
All right, welcome everyone to this week's Breaking History. I noticed that one of our streams is not working. I think it's working on Rumble and probably Twitter. I'm not too sure what this notification is. So in hindsight, whoever is not being able to, can't watch this, don't know what to do for you, but it'll be recorded anyway. So until then, Gordon is running a little bit late. He's just going through a bit of some shuffles at work. However, next week he assured me that everything will be sorted out. I've got a few points. I woke up this morning, was happily surprised in some ways. I mean, obviously I was up, like I think most people were, quite late, just following the shenanigans, just seeing if anything could be, if the game board was going to be tipped over, as has been the concern for many people that I know. Didn't happen, not yet at least. So a victory has occurred. There's a lot more potential. There's a lot more to work with at this moment than there was 24 hours ago. Once again, we should never get too confident in having won a battle and losing sight of the broader war. We are now however, in a very important new phase of battle, which is going to be kicking off as of last night. And a friend of mine just sent me a little image that it gave me a chuckle, and I'm just going to share that. Then I'm going to share a video and then a word from today's sponsor. So the image that I got when I rolled out of bed and looked at my phone featured what is probably in the hearts of many woke liberals right now. What's the rage fest that's beginning across the energy field of the Western world, and I think this adequately does portray the essence of the zeitgeist for many who have been brainwashed on the woke left side of witchery. But I was thinking, that's probably the right kind of feeling. Really well done AI image there. Good job, AI. But I was thinking it couldn't really be that. Nobody would let themselves go that crazy, would they? And then I looked at the next little video that I received following this image, which was something that I'm sure is happening in the hundreds of examples. This is probably one of hundreds or thousands of examples of therapeutic rage sessions all over the United States, probably Canada and Europe too. This one happening in a forest. Let's just have a look. Sorry, I'm sorry to do that to you all, but I found that both jarring and slightly satisfying at the same time. I hope that those, I mean, are these women part of witch covens? Probably some are. That has been a big thing. But I hope that they get all of that anger and angst and frustration out the way they are. It's probably a constructive way of doing it, breaking sticks in a forest rather than tearing down the nation. So I'm hoping that that's therapeutic and cathartic for them. But again, once again, I think it's satisfying in some ways, some perverse ways for me to just chuckle on that as it is for many of you guys. Now, as I mentioned, there is, I'm a very, very hopeful person. I tend to be solution oriented. A lot of people that I talk to are somewhat cynical and black-pilled. I think many people know that I am very, very focused on the occult, secret societies and mystery cults that have been sort of shaping or misshaping human history. And I'm somewhat less than enthusiastic on the rise of certain satanic ideologies like transhumanism, which is a hybrid of, an evolutionary hybrid from eugenics, as far as the root of the ideology. And I do see it as a religion for for the elites, the wannabe self-professed blue bloods. So when I see certain figures vectoring around and trying to influence Trump, like Peter Thiel or Elon Musk, for me, I'm not that enthusiastic. I have a lot of weary trepidation considering they're both devoutly committed to transhumanism and the merger of human beings with machines. And both of them believe really, I believe they really do seem to be serious when they say it, that we're living in a computer simulation. So for me, that's very Gnostic and dangerous modes of thinking. So a lot of people that I talk to get a bit cynical about those associations with Trump. That being said, I don't think that it's as simple as saying because there are bad people or people I identify as being bad actors that you could judge things one or another ways. There's thousands of new positions opening. We have Tulsi Gabbard, we got RFK Jr., who are authentic people despite the problems that they might have. There are thousands of new positions that are going to be filled, appointments that are going to be made. And Trump is not as stupid as he was, or naive as he was in 2016, going into Washington for the first time in a position of authority, and has a lot more sense of who has been vetted, who can be trustworthy and who is not, who can he negotiate with or use and who can he not. And I think that I hope that he's very wise on these points, because there is going to be a major battle happening. And speaking of which, Gordon has just entered the stage, but before Gordon comes on, we're going to do a word from today's sponsor, and then we're going to just kick right into it. So a word today from, who's today's sponsor? It is My Pillow. Let's have a word from My Pillow.
A large retail store just canceled a huge order, leaving us with a ton of extra My Pillows. But you know what? That's their loss. I'm going to make it your gain. For the first time ever, you get standard classic My Pillows for wholesale prices, only $14.88. I can't believe I'm even saying that. Only $14.88. But it gets even better. For a limited time, I'm going to offer my entire classic collection at wholesale prices. Upgrade to a queen size My Pillow for just $18.88. King size only $1 more. Get my body pillows for $29.88 and multi-use My Pillows for only $9.88. So go to mypillow.com or call the number on the screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of wholesale pricing for the first time ever on TV, including my standard size My Pillow, only $14.88. They've never been offered this low before. We have limited quantities at this price, so limit's going to be 10, and once they're gone, they're gone.
All right. Now, without further ado, let me introduce Gordon. Hello. Oh, Gordon, you're on mute. I can't hear you. Nope. For those just simply listening, Gordon is resolving a technical issue. Nope. Still just see your lips moving. The mic is still not cooperating, but he has an idea. I see that his index finger has been pointed, implying an idea. And there's a sense of confidence exuding from his face, which also implies an idea, a positive, solution-oriented idea. So I could see him working on it. We're going to get there. All right. No. Yep. Okay, Gordon has bounced out of this digital room in order to troubleshoot, and he will be right back in. So until Gordon comes back in, I'm sure he's going to come back in a few seconds, so I don't want to commit to any unfolding of a heavy idea concept prematurely, knowing this. So we're just going to hold up. I hear sound. This is good.
Is happening.
Repeat that. What?
Can you hear me?
I can hear you, but I can't see you now. But the hearing works.
Man, that is hold on.
Yeah.
Stand by. Boom.
Oh. Yes. All right.
Dude, wow. I don't know what the hell is going on over here, but sorry about that. Sorry for being tardy to the party, guys. It has been a crazy couple weeks, really. But man, I was up till 3:30 in the morning on the election stream with John and them. Man, what a wild night. Just whew. It's
Yeah.
nice to take a deep breath, man. I think today we're gonna do. I don't know what you had in mind for today, Matt. Well, how are you? First of all, how are you feeling right now as a Canadian?
As a Canadian, I'm very satisfied and relieved in some ways that my worst expectations or fears did not pop out. I mean, obviously, I'm a creature of trepidation, and I'm very, very tuned to looking at negative outcomes. So my mind was pondering, I think, possibly overly extensively, all of the negative scenarios that could involve the kicking over of the chessboard before, during, or after the elections. I was really of the view that we wouldn't even find out what the result might be until January. That was something I was leaning towards, that there'd be
Yeah,
so many
that's what I thought too.
shenanigans as a repeat of 2020. But I was immensely relieved. I still have trepidation, but I was very relieved to wake up with the results that I've woken up to so far. And obviously, yeah. What do you as an American? I'm just watching this from the outside, trying to make sense of things as always. But what do you want, who are on the inside, on the battle lines, on the front lines? How are you feeling about this?
Feeling good. I mean, I'm feeling great actually. I mean, it hasn't really fully sunk in with me. Like I feel like it's and I think Ash was saying this as well. It's just like I have a very timid. I have PTSD, man. I have PTSD from 2020. It's like the feelings of 2020, 2016. Last night, I will say this. Last night felt a lot more like 2016 than it did like 2020. I mean, there were moments as we were on stream, we were like, dude, this is what happened in 2020. We got to be careful. We got to be careful about getting too excited here. But just living through 2021 specifically, it was really 2021. It was just such an abusive moment, I think, narratively, psychologically for a lot of us, in terms of what this government did to us and the people who ran this government. And it's like they really ripped a sense of security from us in a way that even the people who were in this battle before that weren't even probably really fully prepared for, because it was just such a ruthless situation. We got to remember that as we go forward from here. But yeah, I mean, you probably read my Badlands news brief take yesterday morning, like the trumpet call, as some of the people in chat called it, or in the comments called it. But just preparing everyone psychologically for yesterday. And what I compared it to was, I went on Liberty Den a few weeks ago and told the story about having dinner 9 years ago with the guy who was a veteran of 2nd Ranger Battalion Dog Company. He was at Normandy. If you're not familiar with the story, he was part of the team that had to climb Point du Hoc, which was a 100-foot cliff, and all the military intelligence people said that it was a suicide mission and everyone who was going to go was going to die. It was an intense story, what the guy told me, and I relayed it to everyone on Liberty Den, and then I reiterated it in the news brief yesterday, and basically said, today we're climbing this cliff. No idea what's going to be at the top of the cliff. It could be an absolute shit show, hell on earth, fight, or maybe they've retreated and we just start the walk across the French countryside. But somewhere in that countryside, we're going to engage the enemy. There's no doubt about it. And like you, I mean, psychologically, I'm dug in now. It's like we've made it to the top of the cliff. We've established the beachhead. By the way, I just saw that General Flynn posted almost the exact same language on his X account, where he said, "This is Normandy. We just took the beach, but the battle begins here." It's like we have to prepare now for the counterattack. We have to prepare to move inland, because there is going to be a fight. These people are not going to give us our country back. Mainly because they know what's going to happen when we are given the full authority, when we're given the full power. We're going to break their toys, and we're going to put a lot of them in prison, probably because they've been engaged in horrible crimes, not only crimes against humanity, but crimes against our country. They've taken everything that was sacred, and they have broken it. They've broken our trust in our government. They've broken our trust in society. They've broken our trust in one another. My wife has been texting me all morning, because I told everyone on the election coverage last night that she was like, it's amazing how chipper she is. She's such a positive, like, bubbly person. I love her for it. But I didn't realize until yesterday when she told me, she was like, "I don't think Trump's going to win." We went to vote together. She's like, "I don't think Trump's going to win." And I was like, "Really?" I was like, you really don't think Trump's going to win? and I guess she's been like holding this back from me the whole time, but she's like, no, she's like, I don't think they're gonna let him win. Like, I honestly think that, and that it's a mixture of that and then just living in this bubble, this like that she's probably in because she's not in this kind of media space that we're in, and she's exposed to a lot of these people like suburbanites who support Kamala. She knows a lot of people who support Kamala.
Yeah, just before you jumped in, I played a little video that you've probably seen of a bunch of these suburbanites going out into the forest to cathartically just scream, to rage scream, which was again very satisfying for the audience based on the comments. But being around too much of that can definitely skew your thing.
So she was convinced that the combination of all the people that she's seeing in her life, and it's not, it's not that many people. It's not like you drive around my area compared to what it was like in 2016 and 2020 in terms of signage. There's almost no Kamala Harris signs. There are Kamala Harris signs, but there's barely any compared to how many Biden signs there were in 2020 and how many Hillary signs there were in 2016. But the people still exist and they're still out there. And she's also going around like, from her professional job and engaging with a lot of people who were like vocally pro Kamala. So she felt like the combination of that there actually was a support base for Kamala that she could see, combined with the fact that the apparatus was not going to allow Trump to come back. She had already just accepted that there was no way Trump was going to return to office. And she just accepted it. And so today she is on cloud 9. She won't stop texting me. She's like, I'm just so happy. Like, I never thought this was going to happen. Like, this is like, I'm almost jealous of how elated she is because I don't have that same elation. I should maybe. But it's just, I'm sitting here I'm sitting here in the trench, like staring at the horizon, just waiting for the counterattack to come. Cause I'm like this, it's quiet, almost too quiet. Like that's my mindset right now. And I don't mean to black pill. Don't think that that's me dooming. I'm not dooming. There's going to be a fight between now and Trump getting into office. And then after Trump gets into office, there's probably going to be another fight after that, where we have to psychologically break the conditioning of our civilization, because our society is being deeply conditioned to accept a reality that basically requires them to lock arms and defend the very thing that is sucking the life force out of all of us, that is sucking the life force out of our civilization. And it's a very twisted, satanic, inverted dynamic from what God and the creator intended. But that's the reality of the world we live in.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think it's important to have that attitude in general, because if we allow ourselves to go all, like the end of Star Wars episode 3, or was it episode 6, when the Ewoks are celebrating, and I felt like human beings around me can naively sometimes or prematurely go into Ewok mode and think that, okay, we're going to have this great celebration in the trees because we beat the Empire and all of this stuff, but not realize that, no, that was a very important strategic battle, but it's part of a much broader process. And this empire doesn't just go away after a battle. As the American founding fathers understood, based on their writings, they understood that this was that 1776 or 1781 and the consolidation of the fight of the American Revolution was simply one of what would be an ongoing battle to actualize here on Earth those very high ideals contained within the founding documents. And the ideals are solid, whether you go 1,000 years in the past or the future, any part of humanity, those are universal principles embedded, and it was understood that they were worth dying for. But to walk the walk of those high ideals is not very easy. In fact, I don't think we'll ever achieve that 100%, because human beings are not angels. We're always like, we always have temptation. We always have, a bit of the material pulling us down that our conscience has to and our minds have to overcome for the health of our souls. So that's always going to be a thing. So of course, there were a lot of compromises, bad decisions, giving some human beings only 3/5 of the recognition of being a full human being than other white human beings who are not slaves. These were definitely bad compromises, but they were compromises that were understood to be part of the fight. And you could say in that sense, the Civil War was just another battle of 1776 to actualize less imperfectly those ideals, right? To form a more perfect union, just as the battles for civil liberties under John F. Kennedy and Martin Luther King Jr. of the 60s, to provide voting rights, access to to desegregation. That was like another aspect of the fight. But you've always had this other satanic counterinsurgency or counter-revolutionary operation, which sometimes will take control and try to direct the revolutionary energy of a people, because America is built upon, ironically, to be a conservative, to be truly conservative, and to hold to those American traditional values means you have to also have a revolutionary, anti-oligarchical heart and mind. Ironically, right, to be truly conservative, you have to also be truly revolutionary, because you have to always stand up to satanic forces that would like to control through stasis and feudal management of society. They would like to control us and keep us as degenerate and subdued as possible. So that is what controlled the witches' covens of the American colonial days that Cotton Mather was fighting. When you had like all of these different, satanic covens all spread out through the Hellfire Club in the early 18th century, all throughout the colonies, throughout England. This is what Benjamin Franklin and others were intervening upon, infiltrating, getting a sense of what these things are, how to fight them. They didn't go away. They just were rebranded in the form of certain Scottish Rite secret societies that gained hegemony in the 19th century over all of the other Masonic lodges that were anti-imperial. There was a huge fight, and we saw that the Albert Pike, which was also tied to things like the Masonic Order of Malta, which is sort of the right hand to the Templar left hand path, right, of the Jesuits, or what Pike said the Jesuits became, which were formerly the Templars. So Pike represented that hardcore right ritualistic hand that was part of breaking apart the Union in the Civil War. And I think this is dangerous. This is still a factor. I'm saying this because I think that this is still one of those factors that people have to have strategically in their mind going into the next wave of battle, is that what was put out, and Obama is a big backer of this film company called A24. Have you heard of that?
No.
A24.
A24. That's like the Netflix thing, right? Is that what he uses to make the Netflix documentaries, or
Close.
I don't know.
It's connected.
Tell me about it. Tell me about it.
It's a weird film studio that is overlapping with Netflix, but it's its own thing. And it's doing a new level of psychological manipulation and social engineering than I've ever seen in any movie. Like they did the Civil War movie, very ambient, very immersive, but they put forth their programming within these films in a more subtle way than I've ever seen films do. Like I think Hollywood's been under the control of the CIA for decades, but this is a next level thing. And what was the other one? There's another, anyway. But I think that the Civil War plan that Albert Pike, who was again reforming, he was the leader, the Grand Master of the Scottish Rite, and a Confederate general. He was part of the Golden Circle. He's part of the Order of Malta operation, representing the hard fascist right. That was working in tandem with the northern jurisdiction of the Scottish Rite at the very same time that were controlling the radical abolitionists, that were also, through which they were also deploying like proto-Antifa groups like John Brown, who shot up Harper's Ferry. He was part of the Caleb Cushing networks from the Eastern establishment, Boston Brahmins, the blue blood establishment. That was all part of a Freemasonic operation that had this northern and southern thing to amplify tensions on both sides, to bring things to a breaking point that would ultimately resolve in America going into a reactionary civil war, cannibalizing itself, and coming out with something that would be a divided pro-British micro set of confederations. And that's one plan that they're still trying to manipulate. And I don't know to what degree, and I'm sure that the Antifa and Soros-funded zombies have been gaming this out and planning this out. I remember that you had things like Gavin Newsom and John Podesta in 2020 doing the tabletop exercises as well. What should we do as Democrats if Trump wins in 2020? And remember that part of that gaming involved California declaring themselves a breakaway state along with Cascadia from the north in Oregon. They would break away, and then some eastern states would also break away and have some weird scenario like that. That would also involve probably conflict of a violent sort. So I'm wondering, like, is that what they're preparing the groundwork for? Like, are they going to all of a sudden, have a bunch of blue states declare independence? I don't know. Are they going to like start lighting shit on fire? Maybe. I don't know.
That's
But-
interesting. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, like, let's back up because, like, I want to be clear with everyone because this audience, I think we have one of the largest audiences I've seen. We have 2,700 people watching live right now, which is great. Thank you all for being here. I'm so happy that we're all here, and appreciate everybody's support with this show. People who are familiar with my content know that I like to bring levity to the moment. Like, I like to write about the Sovereign Alliance. I like to talk about Trumpomania. And I'm going to continue to do that. Don't worry there. I like to boost morale because I think morale is one of those things. Troop morale is so important to a war of attrition, which is what this is. This is ultimately a war of attrition. And in this moment, I want everyone to be celebratory. I want people to embrace this and have the catharsis of what happened last night. So do not let my disposition in this moment take away from any feeling that you may have right now. If anything, I want you to lift me up and be the levity that I try to bring every day to the brief, because this is, my mind immediately goes. I just pulled Jay Vine's comment up where he says, the stoic in me, I'm looking for the next objective, and I'm kind of the same way. It's like I'm sitting here peering around, like, how is evil going to reinvent itself next? And that's not, trying to be I'm still optimistic, absolutely optimistic. I know this is going to be ultimately the outcome that we all know it will be, which is a bright future. But there's going to be a process to get there. There's going to be battles ahead, and like General Flynn said, this is only the beginning of the final battle, the very beginning. So, take the victory, celebrate it. Let it swell your heart with joy, but be prepared for the next wave, because the next wave is coming. We don't know what it's going to look like, but we have so much more at our disposal now than we had 4 years ago. It is
Absolutely.
such a different environment than it was. We have a very, very sophisticated alternative media apparatus. We have a network that we've built where I actually know these people in the comments. I see their names and I know what their faces look like because I've met them in person at Gart's. I've gone to lunch with people here in town who are Badlanders. So it's like we actually know each other in person now, whereas in 2020 everybody was just an anonymous face on the internet. So we have such a different perspective now. One story that I would tell General Flynn if I ever met him is that in 2016, my brother killed in the boat accident. When we were doing the lawfare for that, I had to go through. This is like late 2017, early 2018. We had to go through our text messages, pull text messages, and give them to the investigators. And I was going through and I found a text between myself, my dad. It was a group text thread. It was me, my dad, and my older brother. And it was, I guess it was November 3rd, 2016. And it was like 7:02 a.m., 7:03 a.m. I remember reading the text like a year later. I remember sending it. I was like, oh, I forgot all about this. But I walked out of the polling booth like so pumped up. But first time I voted for Trump. Second time, I guess, after the primary. And I sent them a text saying General Flynn is leading a silent civil war against really, really evil people. I think I may even use the word deep state at that point. Deep state. And, and this is like, we're going to kick their ass, basically. That was the crux of the text. And my brother and my dad both thought I was insane. And I think still to this day, my dad still thinks I'm a little like out there. But it's so different now. It's like, back then I was like, oh man, like we're going to expose this thing. Trump's going to win. We're going to expose this thing. And it's going to, that was 8 years ago, 8 years ago. And so it has been, it's been a wild ride. And I look at where we are now, and we have everything that we need now to complete this mission. Everything. It's right in front of us. We just have to execute. It's a chess game. We've effectively already won. We just have to continue playing out the game until we reach checkmate.
Yeah.
But I think the game theory board is almost set. That doesn't mean get overconfident. It doesn't mean, let off the gas. But I really do think that we just have to execute from here and be vigilant, have your head on a swivel, because I do think that these people that we're up against understand that this is an existential struggle for them, that when we do ultimately regain our sovereignty, we're going to destroy their systems that they've used to control things and ultimately hold them accountable for the crimes they've committed. So therefore, they're going to do everything they can to stop us and maybe even scuttle the ship before giving control back to us.
It's not unheard of. That is absolutely expect. We're dealing with absolute satanic evil. Like they're religiously committed to evil. Though whatever mental gymnastics might be associated with justifying that as somehow a necessary weird version of good for these ideologues. But that being said, you're dealing with a religious sort of fervor that is absolutely committed to stasis. So yes, be prepared for anything, but at the same time, yeah, don't downplay. I don't want to downplay the morale either, and people should really soak up this celebration. I agree in that sense as well. What do you think right now on terms of the Senate and the House of Representatives? What's your take on that situation? Might the Republicans also come out dominant in those, or do we know anything more at this stage?
That's a fantastic question. So my understanding is that we have, and I haven't dug back into it this morning, but my understanding when I hung up last night was that we control both the House and the Senate now. In chat, please correct me if I'm wrong. But I want to share this post, because that's a really, really good point from Colonel Towner. Because this goes back to what Chris Paul from Badlands always talks about. And he ended up, I think Chris Paul called it a long time ago. He called it. He said this is what his concern was, what they were going to do. And let me pull this up. Stand by for processing. Okay. So this is from Colonel Tanner Watkins, and she said, for those just listening, it says cognitive disconnect. You are supposed to believe in Arizona, 1.56 million voted for Donald Trump, 1.05 million voted for Kerry Lake. And then it says in parentheses, 106,000 voted for a Democrat senator after voting for Trump. And then 1.108 million voted for a Republican for the House races further down the ballot. If people voted straight GOP, Kerry Lake would be 4,000 votes below the alleged cartel-linked opponent. Nothing to see here. Move along. Approximate totals that are officially reported is for president, you have 2.29 million or 2.209 million votes cast for president, 2.162 million votes cast for Senate, and 2.138 million votes cast for the House. And we talked about this last night with other races and we didn't have the answers because we weren't necessarily, full on experts. I mean, we had CanCon and Ash with us, and they're the closest things we have to experts. And I would consider either one of them experts in election integrity now. But we were looking at Pennsylvania. We were looking at other states where the same thing was happening, where you had votes cast for president that were much higher than the number of votes cast for the seats. We did give for allow for the idea that maybe people do show up. Maybe there are a handful of people who show up and only vote for Trump and are maybe like despondent towards every other politician out there and don't care, and they just throw the ballot in and walk away. And if you do that, I would be like, that is a very foolish thing to do, because you're basically just leaving your ballot open for somebody else to finish filling it out potentially. Yeah. So I would not recommend doing that. So, but to the extent that we're seeing these numbers that we're seeing here, that is a lot of it. And so here, let's look down at what the reported numbers are. So with Trump and Kamala Harris, you have 1.156 million votes for Trump, 1.5 for Harris. And the senator, it's 1.111 million for Ruben Gallego, Gallego. I don't know if I'm saying his name right.
Mm.
And then Kerry Lake is 1.05. So, 100,000 votes. Did 100,000 people really show up in Arizona, of all places, which had probably some of the worst election integrity issues back in 2020? You really think that people showed up, only voted for Trump, and either didn't vote for Kerry Lake or voted for the opponent, like the other guy, and then walked out? There's no way that I believe that that's what happened. So what Chris Paul had predicted months ago was that his concern was that they were going to scale down the election theft this time, let Trump win, and by doing so, they could then subvert the down ballot candidates and keep some of these real fighters, real patriots like Kerry Lake out of Congress, out of office, and then basically just work and focus on subverting Trump through his second term, which I do think may be their plan.
Yeah.
And then as I said last night, because this came up last night, we were talking about it from a game theory standpoint, just wargaming the whole thing. There's the potential that maybe Trump has anticipated that. Trump knows they're doing that, and maybe you lean into that a little bit, because if they think there's a chance that they can survive Trump and that this isn't as existential as maybe they would think based on the campaign rhetoric, maybe they don't blow everything up, like maybe they keep the critical infrastructure in place. They just focus on subverting Trump, destabilizing things, and hang on for dear life for the next 4 years until Trump's gone, and then they can deal with whoever comes after him. And I can see it from like multiple perspectives. Maybe that is what they want to do. Maybe there's an incentive to do that. I think the reason I lay all that out, I apologize for going on and on, but the reason I lay all that out is because I think about Sun Tzu's Art of War, and basically what he says is that the ultimate victory is nobody dies. The ultimate victory is getting your opponent to surrender before anybody has to be killed. But that almost never happens, because there's always somebody who is willing to die for a cause, or there's somebody who's able to convince other people to go die for their cause. But if you do have to fight, the best way to fight is to not annihilate your enemy, but to allow your enemy to retreat. Because if your enemy thinks that this is an existential battle, your enemy will dig in and will fight to the very last man, and you will end up destroying your army trying to destroy your enemy. So the smarter move is to allow for a very narrow passage, which you control, and allow your enemy to retreat through that passage. And then you can deal with them at that point, whether you ambush them at that point or you sue for peace or what have you. That opens up the game theory map to a whole different possibilities. So when I look at what Trump, like if I'm gaming this out, if I'm one of Donald Trump's guys and I'm gaming this out and I'm thinking about how do I navigate this and basically minimize damages, minimize loss of life, minimize chaos, consider all the geopolitical factors of what could happen if America became destabilized. I would look at it like there's an infinite number of moves that the enemy can make. The enemy has infinite resources. They have so many different people that they could deploy. Yeah. So rather than trying to be the boy with his finger in the dam and trying to plug all the holes in the dam and account for every possible situation, maybe it makes more sense to create the opening that is most favorable to them, present this opening to them and be like, this is the path that's the most favorable. So then they see the opening and they say, all right, that's the path. But little do they know you're the one who's opened the path for them. You then control the conduit that they're moving through. And then that gives you the opportunity to lay traps, ambush, whatever it is you plan to do next. But at least they're taking the path that you can anticipate and you can account for, rather than the infinite alternatives, which you couldn't possibly game plan for. So, right. I'm looking at it from that perspective. That's where my mind is right now, just for everyone to understand why I'm not bouncing off the walls right now. It's only because I'm just thinking about what do we have to do next, because the wave's coming, right?
Yeah. No, it's an important exercise, and I think that the whole study of historical battles from the standpoint that we often discuss is very valuable to lend itself into doing this responsibly, because We're often conditioned, whether we know it or not, just by virtue of having been born in and processed through the culture that we find ourselves in. There are certain errors in judgment and how we conceptualize reality that are very much influenced by social engineers that gave us naive readings or a tendency, bad reflexes to try to read things overly simplistically, like a Hollywood movie, for example, where the good guys just win, right? That is something which it's nice to sit back and watch a 2-hour movie and have that satisfaction of the good guys just defeating the bad guys long, and they lived happily ever after. It's very satisfying, but at the same time, reality is more nuanced than that. And I think that, if you look at the mindset, the philosophy of people like Ben Franklin, who for me is a big reference point. Because I'm like, how do you make miracles happen? Things that would be statistically impossible within the context of an evil system of controls. How could impossibilities be made possible that would be otherwise necessary because they're based upon natural law? So I got to look at the minds of people who are maestros for the good, who run good conspiracies. Right. We all know that there's bad conspiracies, but there's also good conspiracies. And that's the reason why we broke out of the caves and, we're able to defy the Zeusian gods of Olympus, which I personally think were images generated by various ancient Greek writers like Aeschylus or Sophocles, or Homer, to portray the actual oligarchical system of these wannabe inbred humans that were the sorcerer kings, keeping the system of control and central command and control in the hands of a limited grouping of bloodlines who would convey a propaganda image to the masses in ancient times, just like the god Pharaoh was portrayed as more than human. So too was, I think, these images of the Zeusian Olympian gods, the immortals, who were above human. And these were, I think, ways of, some of these stories that Aeschylus and Homer is writing, I think they're exposing the degeneracy of the actual behavior and modes of thinking of the gods, who are just sexual deviants like Zeus, who can't help but just rape everything that has a hole in it, and they're orchestrating wars for their own perverse objectives, like the Trojan War was, as when people read Homer's Odyssey and Iliad, you could see that this was being manipulated by these gods from above, playing the game board out of partially boredom, partially a belief in their own necessity that they had to do this for the sake of control. But it's exposing this thing. But it's just a magic show. They're projecting an image that would keep us in a state where we think that because we're just mortal, we're thus, there's no point trying to resist the superhumans, the Übermenschen. We are just Untermenschen. So that sense of what Ben Franklin was doing was brilliant, because he tried to sue for peace for years with the British Empire, because he knew that there were people who were human, who he could organize and bring out the best of, even within the British House of Commons and House of Lords, who were corrupt. But he was like, I could find something human in them that would be inclined to see that it would be in their best interest of England to allow the colonies to have manufacturing, to have some autonomy. And he gave it his best shot. And when he could see that was no longer an opening, he's like, all right, new scenario, we're going for independence. And he, at the same time, he did that with some diplomatic brilliance, because he was in England, or no, he was in France at the time, organizing the French to come in, backing up the American revolutionaries, which was largely the thing that tipped the scales in favor of the fight. But he made sure as well that he gave Britain at every chance a chance to get out, to say, like, okay, you could save face. We'll let you out of the headlock, but you have to eat humble pie and rethink what you've been doing, Hellfire Club ideologues. Like, I know what you do. And you could say, well, maybe that was a mistake, that they didn't, slaughter all of the British troops in 1781. Maybe they should have. But would you lose the moral high ground at the same time? Would you what of yourself would you lose if you put everybody up on the wall and you just kill all of the soldiers who were there in America and after they've surrendered and stuff? Now, that was a risk. It's a gamble because you're then throwing into future generations the gamble to say, okay, it's a republic if you can keep it. It means that, like, okay, we're gonna create something better. We're gonna give it to the next generation to finish the job, but they might not be able to they might abrogate their responsibilities. They might. And maybe those fifth columnists might regroup inside of America, as did happen, and might set up things like the Bank of Manhattan and Wall Street, and might set up the Scottish Rite out of Charleston, in Carolina. And they might do that and kill your presidents. They might try to corrupt your people and take control of the media and create Hearst, have Hearst and Vanderbilt run, press agencies. And they might do that, but you have to be able to have that sort of leap of faith to know that, okay, human beings are better than that. We are, if we give them the opportunity, we will side with natural law, and we will be willing to do what your friend who gave you that story from World War II. That's a human thing. You're just like, I have a duty. I'm a duty-oriented person. There is a greater evil that my conscience will not allow me to accept, animates my world. And if that means walking into something that could likely mean I die, then so be it. I'm going to scale the wall. I'm going to march forward. But the point is, you have a sense that, no, you're on the side of God. There is the oligarchy is not. They're defiant of it. They're a perversity, an aberration in the universe. They are not meant to exist in the long term. Doesn't mean they can't do damage in the short term, but that's a very important state of mind that you exhibited just now when you were going through your friend's story and your general mindset.
Well, and just so you know, because I realized that you probably didn't hear that when I told the original story. The guy was probably about 90 years old. My grandfather, it was a chance encounter where we went to the dining room at their retirement home, and we sat down and we ate. And he sat down with us, and my grandfather was like, "Oh wow, like this guy," and he like talked to me and said, "Hey, this is my grandson. Please, I know it's hard, but please tell him the story." And so that's what started it, and the guy explained he was 18 years old and his best friends were with him in boot camp, and they all got assigned to the same unit, and they all fell off the cliff. So he said he described like the ladders got shot up. They got pushed down because of the storm surge pushed them down the beach. So the ladders didn't reach the top of the cliff. They had to climb the last 30 feet or so of rock with 60 pounds of gear, with no climbing gear and no ladder. And while the Germans were shooting down at them with machine guns and dropping grenades on their heads. And then he said he listened to his two best friends fall off the cliff and like fall to their death. Didn't even turn around and watch, but he knew they died. And he kept climbing to the top. And then when they planted the charges on the artillery guns, which was the whole target, the whole point of climbing the cliff was to blow up these artillery guns. He was the only surviving member of his landing craft, which was probably 30 guys, I would guess.
Wow.
So very intense. And so he said to me, this was 2015, Caitlyn Jenner had just come out, or Bruce Jenner had just come out and said he was a woman. The world at that point was completely inverting. That was when like the culture started to really lose its mind, and the whole like woke stuff started to really take off. And he basically, like with tears in his eyes, he was like, if you and your friends don't figure this out and fix it, then my friends climb that cliff for nothing. And that was like a very powerful moment for me. And I feel like we have figured it out. I mean, look where we are now. Like we figured it out. We did it. It's not done. We have to finish the fight, but we made it up the cliff. We took out the guns. Now we got to move inland. But just getting on the beach, just getting on the cliff, that was everything. That was monumental in and of itself, but it's not over. We can't start popping bottles of champagne yet, because then, they're going to get us in our sleep. So that what you just said though is so important. That story you just told from 1781, because when you go out looking for monsters, there's always the danger that you become the monster, right? If you don't show measure, you don't have restraint, if you don't have a moral compass, sometimes you become the thing that you set out to destroy. We're seeing that happen right now, by the way, in Israel. We are watching Israel become the thing that it has always accused the other side of being like this mindless killing machine that is just hell bent on destroying everything in its path, or everything that it considers to itself to oppose. And everything it's always accused Iran and these other proxy militias of being, everything that it's accused them of being, these religious zealots who, no matter what, are willing to destroy themselves in order to destroy Israel. Israel, or the leadership of Israel, has become that thing. Like they are now the monster that they set out to destroy. And I think it's an important lesson for us to observe, because, you could be the moral righteous actor at the very beginning, and we can have the debate, whether or not you feel that way about the situation over there. That's a separate discussion. But I'm saying you could be the moral righteous actor at the beginning, and then at the end, you end up being the bad guy. You end up being the villain, where then another moral righteous actor has to come in and destroy you, because you are now a liability for everyone around you, including the people that you care about, because you have become so reckless. And so we have to remember that. I think that's another mindset that we have to keep in the back of our head as we move forward, and we gain ground, is that we absolutely need to seek retribution for what the crimes that have been committed against our society. But we also don't want it to become the French Revolution. We don't want it to become out of control. We also don't want people in the future to look back at what we did and say that was totally illegitimate and uncalled for, and they took it way too far, and therefore we need to undo what they did, and those successes are no longer legitimate. Which is why it's really important to do it by the book, to be moral, to be measured, and really, I think, to focus almost as much on setting an example as opposed to seeking retribution. Like, it's not about revenge, it's about justice. But it's really about making sure this never happens again by creating that example and saying, here's what we did to the perpetrators. Therefore, don't ever do it again, or you're going to face the same consequence.
Yep. No, and I like that you brought up the French Revolution as a good example, a case study of what not to do and how not to lose your head, because that's literally what happened to tens of thousands of people. Is they literally lost their heads after morally and intellectually stepping out and allowing themselves to be turned into an angry mob that was rightfully indignant and angry, rightfully so. There was a lot of injustice on the peasants for generations that built itself up. Corruption in the church, for sure. Corruption amongst the elites that were like feudal lords, for sure. A lot of reasons to be angry. But that was then used by the social engineers operating through different, Martinist Freemasonic outfits that had also infiltrated the Grand Orient Lodge, that were then managing rabble rousers and demagogues like Robespierre and Danton and Marat, who were able to capture that rage and direct it towards total anarchy, and that resulted in internal civil war, complete bloodbath. It was called the Terror. It was called the Terror, capital T, for years. And then the resolution was, another puppet named Napoleon, who was able to be introduced as sort of a new proto-Sun King, after what Louis XIV was. He sort of like filled that sort of imagery that the French had been sort of already trained to be obedient to try to like bring back and restore the Roman Empire, with the exact same leading patrician families that were ultimately behind the scenes in the Roman Empire, who were also behind Napoleon. But they maybe had a few other additional families to play with, like the Rothschilds at that point. But the thing today, like you said, it's that it's so important to see what is, to like really self-examine, because that's what the French peasants were not able to do, is they didn't self-examine their hearts to find the inner, like, the mini oligarch, the mini demon inside that could be amplified. If you're not aware of that potential for bad, then if you're not aware of it, it can grow. And it feeds off of certain things, certain emotions, certain sets of ideas, feed that thing that can grow without your even awareness to become more and more. Even I was thinking about the Germans too, right? Like after World War I, the Germans suffered a massive amount of injustice before and during World War I, which was, again, designed to destroy the German culture, the German people, unjustly. They were tricked into the war. After World War I, it was even more suffocating, embarrassment, humiliation, starvation by design. And so, yeah, that couldn't have happened without a bunch of German puppets who were operating for the international bankers inside of Germany, who destroyed their own people for the sake of whatever, is animating people like Benjamin Netanyahu. But despite that, and some of it was maybe religious, a lot of it was corruption, but the people then responded with a correct feeling of indignation, but without understanding the terrain, they ended up becoming radicalized, a small portion first, but then that grew to the point that they started, launching. There was something like 380 German politicians that got murdered by anarchist assassination cults that were all deployed. That satisfied something that was very big in the population. The assassin groups, the biggest one was called the Organization Consul, and after they killed Walter Rathenau, the German foreign minister, a very good man, on a particular solstice day as part of a ritual, by the way, they got illegalized, and the entire governance structure and membership of the Organization Consul became the paramilitary arm of the SS, of the new Nazi party. And then that thing then did things like, you started getting more of a logical, because so much evil was done to us, so much suffocating humiliation, the ends increasingly justified the means, even if it meant burning down their own Reichstag to attain unitary executive authority, because you can't trust the political systems of democracy of the Weimar Republic. And they started justifying, well, maybe it's necessary to create noble lies to blame the communists and blame the Jews, because, people won't necessarily allow us the power to do what we need to do voluntarily. We need to trick them, but for the higher good. And then you had things like the Night of the Long Knives, where hundreds more political opponents, some were bad people. Like some people who got their heads cut off in the French Revolution were bad people. But a lot of them were actually Ben Franklin's allies in the French Revolution who got their heads cut off, who were qualified moral leaders who got thrown into the fire. And all of a sudden there was no leadership. Same thing for Germany, right? A lot of really good, solid people who understood the occult nature of black magicians that had taken over with the Nazi party, with Heinrich Himmler. They understood that. They were fighting it. They were talking about it. They were battling it. They had political power. They were killed in 1934 and 35. And before you know it, then you have a bunch of people goose stepping, throwing the Untermenschen into the fucking over the cliff. And you're like, well, how did that happen? These 15 years earlier, these were like good, idealistic young people who loved Schiller and Beethoven, and now they're like totally like worshiping the Fuhrer as the new Sun King incarnation of Odin, whatever. Like, what? How did that happen? Like,
well, it's important to note and remember that between, I think it was 1750 and 1780, like 30 years, Benjamin Franklin spent almost that entire time in Europe. He came back to America a few times, but especially around 1776. But most of that time he was in Europe, engaging in diplomacy. Most of it was he was in France, building our critical alliances that we needed in order to succeed in the American Revolution. Because it wasn't just France; it was Russia who helped us. There were others who helped us. Russia kept the oceans, kept the maritime trade clean. Catherine the Great was critical in doing that. She established, I forget what it was called, the
neutrality.
Yep, that's it, League of Neutrality, where she made sure that the oceans were and the trade routes were kept clean, and that Britain wasn't just seizing American ships and taking them in, which they did do after Catherine the Great passed away. They did do that, and that's what led to the War of 1812. Was they started in the 1800s, early 1800s, they started seizing ships, American ships, and saying, "Hey, you're actually British subjects." Some of them were British subjects who were trying to become Americans, and they forced them, conscripted them into the British Navy. And a lot of those were, as I understand it and interpret it, provocations. They're provoking the Americans into attacking them so that they could then invade America and burn the White House to the ground, which is what they did.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's super, super important to have that in mind. And you even brought up the Polish, was it the Flying Khazars as well? Like the that were helping the American revolutionaries.
Casimir,
Casimir. It's so important to keep that in mind, because the reason why positive conspiracies have ever been viable and have functioned is because they were global in nature. Like the oligarchy thinks global. That's how they're effective at doing the evil that they do, is that they have a top-down global concept and plan that gives them a sense of context that they operate within, things that don't seem to be linearly connected, like things that go on in India. The oligarchy thinks about how that impacts directly their decisions in a battle that's being waged in America or in Canada or in China. Even though it's geographically very, very far removed, very different cultures, the oligarchy, the British Empire, that was the empire that upon which the sun never set, had a very clear concept that, for example, the Confederate economy was entirely addicted and wired by design on, number one, like the entire creation of an American aristocracy, like what my friend calls a kakistocracy, a low quality, immoral aristocracy wannabe in America, these blue blooded Eastern establishment types. The reason why they were able to create that was one, through the slave economy, and two, through the opium trade. Those were like the dominant evil types of revenue that were being generated to keep a very closed oligarchy that generated things like the Skull and Bone Society, that ran a lot of the operations like Sleepy Hollow, Intelligence Country Club of William Rockefeller, and other things. That was being managed by funding or revenues that were directly tied to an addiction to keep China subdued in what became the center of humiliation through infinite inputs of opium, right? That these families' monies of Wall Street were needed to keep that going, along with the city of London. Cotton, 80% of the cotton purchases of the slave plantation regions that then did the breakaway was being bought up by England, who had control of the manufacturing. They have control of the world manufacturing because they consciously destroyed the manufacturing base of India and China that had formerly been the number one GDP countries in the world in 1800. They were the textile mills of India were wiped out. Hands were cut off of people who were artisans, so that all they were able to do in India was produce opium, and then they couldn't produce their own textiles. So England, which claimed India as their crown jewel, could increasingly take control, utilizing very destructive modes of industrial activity, like employing cheap, like slave child labor in debt colony, or was it debt jails or whatever. Kids would be like sold off to become employees. Orphans would become sold off to become employees in like little textile mills. So all of this was being done in a very, very bad way. But the empire who organized this had a whole cybernetics web mapped out in their minds that they would need India to produce the opium. They would need India not to have the infrastructure, the textiles that they destroyed, so that they could have it. That the opium would then be sent to China, that would give revenue to India to bake in their Indian Brahmin self-controlling corrupt crime syndicates, right? That were often tied to tantric black magic, baked into certain mystery cults that the British were also learning from and feeding into, which were then informing the growth of this Rosicrucian British parasite in England that also was feeding into things that were going on that they were managing inside of America, producing the cotton, keeping America addicted to slavery, so that you're breeding slaves like cattle in America. Even if you couldn't import them, you were still breeding them like cattle, to the point that even though it was illegal to import new slaves, between 1830 and 1861, the slave population went from 2 million to 4 million. So they were just like, it was like baked into like an addiction. So that was the thing. So Ben Franklin, inversely, the good guys, so to speak, who are actually on the side of natural law, are also thinking globally. He was organizing networks of the best people in Russia, in India, to organize the Mysore Rebellion against the British Empire, in Morocco, to have Sidi Muhammad, the emperor, organize the protection against Barbary pirates for American vessels, in Poland, in France, in Germany, and you name it. You had people thinking on that much higher level who were able to create flanking maneuvers against the empire. And you had the same thing every time you got a good leader. You got a Ulysses S. Grant. He's going global. He's organizing global processes, making sure that the greenback policy of national banking protectionism would be accepted by patriots in Japan, in China, in Russia, in South America in the 1870s, 1880s. And it works every time it's done. A system of that is beyond Hobbesian each against all geopolitics. This idea of a win-lose logic of game theory, where you got to like eat or be eaten, the might makes right. That is always broken free from as we recognize our higher self-interest is in working for the interest of our fellow man. Even if they might have a different culture than ours, they have certain common universal traits that make them created in the image of a living, loving, reasonable creator. And if we make our economic relationships or diplomatic security relationships not looking for monsters to destroy, but rather looking for what's human in my neighbor, you can create something based upon natural law in a real durable way, based on infrastructure, making discoveries together. Like, that's real. Then you could have real competition that's healthy, good old fashioned healthy entrepreneurialism, healthy competition. Who could be the best? Who could do the job the best, right? And so you're not in a utopia of a kumbaya, let's all hug each other and have like some forever happy state that couldn't exist, because that's not, human beings are not static. But it's still a healthy harmony of interests. It's a harmony.
Yes.
It's a very different idea.
Which is promoted, I think, through through choices. When people have options, it's like, I think that's what promotes it tends to go towards harmony when you have options. When you have a true free market, when you aren't forced to pick between, one option or maybe two or three options, where the people who are who have those monopolies can then manipulate conditions to benefit themselves. You talk about destroying the economies of India and China. I mean, look at what happened in the 20th century and to what extent this was orchestrated, or it was just circumstances that unfolded that where opportunism was mapped on. I tend to think that a lot of it was orchestrated, but that's a different debate. I mean, you have the creation of the Federal Reserve in 1913. You have which right there in the middle of World War One, right? The end of World War I, you have the creation of the implementation of the income tax as a temporary measure to pay off, in hindsight, a very relatively small national debt, not very large national debt compared to what we're looking at now. That then goes away. World War II happens. The entire industrial base of the civilized world, what was considered the civilized world, Europe, is completely decimated, as well as Japan, completely decimated. And which leaves America as the sole industrial base that has not been bombed out. The income tax is reintroduced to pay off this national debt. It's never repealed again. There's no temporary measure. The income tax just grows from there. And then America, because it's the only industrial base, explodes in GDP and has this huge boon in prosperity, which people might look back and say, well, like, lament the fact that we don't have that same dynamic where we can just dominate and just establish this enormous wealth. But look at what was happening in the background. There was a leech, there was a parasite that was sucking our life force out of us as we're growing. They're sucking our life force out of us using the income tax system, using the IRS, using the entire federal tax code, which exploded in the mid 20th century, especially the 1970s. Then ultimately you have the implementation. You have mortgage banking system evolves. The Fair Housing Act of 1993, I think it was, which is people stopped paying. Bill Clinton signed it, so you stop paying 20% down to buy a house. You only have to put 3.5% down. That then makes housing affordability explode in terms of opportunity for people to buy, which then drives up the price of housing, and it inflates the price of housing. Then 15 years later, in 2008, you have the financial crisis fueled by the mortgage subprime mortgage crisis, where they were taking really, really bad mortgages that they had no business giving to people, mixing them in with good mortgages, and then selling them to other banks. And so then all the banks had these bad subprime deals. The economy collapses because of it. And then they introduce quantitative easing, which is, we're just going to print money. So now we were sucking the life force out of you using the income tax system. Now we're just going to print money because there's so much wealth in this country, in America. We're just going to print more money, call it quantitative easing. And basically we're just stealing your money by printing more money, putting it in our pockets. And then the money in your pockets now becomes worth less. And look where we are now. Now, 15 years later after that, we are at $35 trillion in debt, and there's no realistic way to get out of it. I mean, what do we do now? So that kind of leads us to Donald Trump and where we are right now, where he talks about going back to the tariff system, where the tariffs were financing our entire government. We don't need this giant. We don't need any federal income tax code. You can just operate off tariffs, and allow the free market economy to pay for the public services, roads and whatnot that we need. And you end up actually generating more revenue and more wealth that can be more responsibly spent, rather than having this ridiculous bureaucracy where there is no accountability, there is no public control, and it ends up turning into a giant criminal organization that is very parasitic and self-destructive to civilization.
Amen, brother. I know you told me before we began the show that you have to run off. You have to close it out at around 10 past 1 or so. Is this still?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's everyone. Wow, we have 3,200 over 3,200 people watching. This is amazing. Thank you all for your support. If you wouldn't mind, please smash that thumbs up. That really helps us get up the leaderboards and get more exposure. Thank you all for watching. Let's hit some rants.
Let's do one thing first. I gotta do
your ad. Do the ad and do the rants.
Exactly. All right, we'll do.
Hey there, Badlanders. Do you love Badlands as much as you hate communism? Do you want patriotic apparel that's not made in China, but also won't make you look like a dork? Well, then we've got just the thing for you. Introducing an entirely new line of official Badlands gear made in partnership with the Culture Warriors at Rise Attire and Rise INTL. With 4 brand new collections of original artwork across a wide range of products to choose from. Spread the signal with deep-cut symbols from devolution lore to the ghosts in the machine on the front lines of the Psy War. Wrap yourself in America the Beautiful with the warm tones and textures of Badlands National Park. To the eye of the storm in Mount Rushmore. This is premium quality streetwear, custom made to order from scratch just for you by the Patriots at our East Peoria, Illinois facility. Don't wait. Explore the entire store and order your new gear today at badlandsmedia.tv/rise. Represent Badlands boldly and proudly. This culture war ain't gonna win itself.
Awesome. Sweet. Yeah, I actually have some of that gear that should be arriving here at my house soon. And also Oak McCulloch, Lieutenant Colonel Oak, who I recently interviewed, texted me and said, I just want to read what he texted me because he's listening. He said, we have to always remember our values or we are no better than them. So that's what separates us from the black hats, the enemy, whatever you want to call them, is that we have principles, we have values. And if we abandon those principles and values in order to get them, then we're no better than they are. Well said, Oak. Thank you for reaching out. Thanks for listening. Let's do some rants. And I saw that we have Smay60, $5. You guys dig deep. Appreciate the work and helping to understand the corruption throughout with their works and families doing the wrongs, corrupting everything under the sun. Thank you, Smay. Appreciate that. Just make sure we don't have any more. All right. Well, everybody, we appreciate it. Please hit the thumbs up. Hope you enjoy the show. If you want, you can go to badlandsmedia.tv /boost and do a Badlands boost. It's kind of like a rant whenever if you're listening to this on replay. If you have any ideas for topics you want us to dig into, because we kind of go back and forth between covering the news cycle and then going into like a actual like history topic and doing a deep dive on it. And normally we will tie it to the news cycle as well. Please throw it in the boost. Give us some ideas and we will add it to the list of topics to cover. But Matt, any closing thoughts from you?
No, I think that's great. I know you got to go, so I don't want to like every time. It's a dangerous thing when you lock. I know.
Because we'll just go over 10 minutes, man. I know.
Yeah, no, I'm gonna withhold. I'm not gonna launch the grenade, but yeah, next week we'll jump back in and keep this thought process flowing. I'm sure the world's gonna give us a lot to talk about. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. If people really want to see us unpack something and do a deep dive on a matter of history that's perplexing them, throw it our way. We take suggestions, love it, and certainly it'll feed a lot of creativity. So don't withhold. So Gordon, thank you so much, man, and thank you everybody. Till next week.
See ya.